Hey, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is 4:30, and welcome back to a second day of corporate planning. There is no need to adopt the agenda as we recessed last night, and we'll just continue off where we left off when we took the recess. Ladies and gentlemen, members of council, there was some questions that council asked the administration, and then there was a commitment to have those answers back by tonight. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, Council, I think, had asked 3 specific questions that we had indicated we'd be able to provide some response to this evening. I know that we had just sent that out. I know that Council has a hard copy, I believe, in front of you to reference. And I think at this point, I'll just ask the general managers to speak to their particular question. And I think that starts us off with General Manager of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Town Manager, to Your Worship and all of Council. Apologize, we were struggling to get some of these growth numbers as our external assessor was in the field today. So it isn't included in this memo, but hot off the press, the 5-year average is 1.3%. You can see the estimates within the plan, whereas a 1% growth number in 2022, which we're quite comfortable with as we have seen the permits on the non-residential being 4.2 million and the residential being 25 million. For 2023 and 2024, it becomes a little bit harder to estimate those numbers, and we've definitely taken a conservative approach around that at the 5% growth. I hope that helps or answers the question that was asked last night.
Thank you.
Speak up, I think. Harold missed it.
Okay. He wants to hear it again.
The second question?
Your Worship, just to be clear, was that answer heard clearly? I see you. Yeah? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, the 5-year average was made by, asked by Councillor Laurie, and it was 1.3%. Okay. Question number 2.
Your Worship, the question that was in relation to transit ridership, and we've provided the 3 years of transit average monthly ridership on Route 560, which is the Spruce Grove route into Edmonton, and of course in 2019 it was 10,230. 2020 was 4,620. That's when the COVID affected ridership greatly, and 2021 it's 3,042 year to date, the average monthly ridership. So Stony Plain's portion of that ridership is estimated to be 14%. So 14% of those numbers in 2019 was around 1,400 riders, and in 2020 was around 650 riders for the month. The current ridership for the local route has increased up to 175 in October of Stony Plain riders. Those are the numbers that we have available at this time.
Okay. Thank you for that, for those numbers. Councillor Anderson? Okay. That's good. Question number 3.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. The question that was the third information piece that was provided to you was in regards to table number 3 on page 9 of the report, the highway development strategy, and what the potential cost would be for a strategy to look at Highway 628. And so the response that's been provided is that if the scope was similar to 628, the cost would be similar as well, which would be $55,000, which has been provided in the corporate plan. So,
okay. Thank you very much, and that answers my question. So that's good. Members of council, any other questions, comments from last night before we go into motions of council to change, to argue, debate, consider, and making and fine-tuning this corporate plan to ours? Okay. See none, Members of Council, as we've gone through the corporate plan, administration has done a good job of deciphering Council's commitment and direction from our strategic planning and from the municipal development plan. But now this is the opportunity for Council to fine-tune anything that we see that is necessary to get to where we want to see in our future vision of 25 years down the road. So members of Council, it is open for comments and motions to alter the corporate plan. Councilor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will kick us off this evening. I will start by saying that in reviewing the corporate plan, I'm actually very satisfied with the current plan that sits before us, and I see very minimal need or desire to change anything. I think what we see in there is fair. I think it's reasonable, and for the most part, I think it's needed within our community, and that's the most important part. But there's one project that actually sticks out, and it stems from the replacement of our signs, our entry signs at both the east and the west of the community. And one of the biggest things that I heard when those signs were replaced was the removal of the traditional lamp post from the sign. The second portion of this comes from the redoing of Main Street and all of our old traditional lamp posts being removed because Fortis would not accept those. So on page 37 of our corporate plan, we do have an initiative in table 30 for lighting at Rotary Park. And what that lighting actually is it's the recycling and reconditioning of the decorative light poles from downtown to be installed in Rotary Park. Currently has a cost of $34,000. It is scheduled this year, and it's currently funded out of the federal gas tax, or what we now know as the Building Community Fund. So I do have a motion that I would like to bring forward in regards to that, and we'll just look for a cue that we're ready to receive that. Yeah? Perfect. So I would like to move that we amend the initiative lighting at Rotary Park, and there are 3 parts to the motion. Number 1 is to increase the number of lamp posts from 10 to 12, with 1 designated for the eastern entry sign and 1 for the western entry sign. Part 2 of the motion is to increase the funding from $34,000 to $40,000. To increase the funding from $34,000 to $40,000. And part 3 is to move the funding source from the Building Community Fund or federal gas tax grant to our public art reserve. And once those are captured and displayed, I can speak to that a little more, Your Worship.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councilor Laurie. We just give administration a couple minutes to have that typed up onto the screen. Councilor Laurie, does that look correct?
Yes, Your Worship, it does.
Sure. Councilor Hansard?
Public art.
It is public art. Go ahead and speak to it, Councilor Laurie.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'll start by saying there's an example of this already completed in front of the Stony Plain Fire Hall, and I was fortunate to actually be a part of that project to refurbish and install one of the historical lampposts in that location. It was also done with a solar conversion because there was no power at that location, and it has turned out to be a very beautiful project, and it's a great tribute to the town and the history of the town. As you know, the town lamppost is an iconic figure of the town of Stony Plain. It's even included in our town of Stony Plain logo, and it's something that people recognize quite heartily within our community. These lampposts also previously existed on our old entry signs, with the one on the eastern edge of town actually being lit up and powered, again, because it was an icon in our community. As it states in Table 30, it's part of the town's heritage brand, and that is exactly what it is. So that speaks to why I'd like to see the addition of the lampposts. I'd like to see one at each entry sign to bring that component back. I'd like to make sure that those those lampposts also have the poles for banners, so that we can also use that for celebrating the different events and seasons that we have in our community, as we see with some of our other banners throughout the community. I also think in respect to the funding, obviously the increase in the funding is there because of increasing the 2 lampposts. However, I have 2 key reasons for a change in the funding source. Number one is because this is restoring a heritage brand, or restoring lampposts that are part of our heritage brand, as much as this is a functional capital item, I think this is also a historical capital item. And I believe these lampposts are considered public art in the eyes of our community. They are a landmark, they are a piece of our community that people recognize. So it's not just a functional light. We could put anything in Heritage Park if we wanted lighting. I think these have a specific aspect to them that to me lean more towards public art. That reserve is very healthy right now. It's currently sitting at $265,000 with an addition of $40,000 planned in the 2022 corporate plan, which brings that to $305,000, with only $25,000 so far committed for this corporate plan. So it would still leave that at, if my math's correct, a $280,000, $240,000 balance at the end of this. Would that be correct, administration? Yes, I'm seeing some nods. Perfect. So a $240,000 balance at the end of this year. What it also does is, as we've heard, the federal gas tax, or now the Canada Building Community Fund, is a fund that we have seen come to our community that's had some adjustments over. But now that frees up the money from that fund to be potentially used towards other items that that are needed within our community. And though I don't have a specific item in mind at this point in time, I do feel that administration likely can be fairly creative to figure out a way to use that $34,000 in the best interest of the municipality. That's essentially what I have at this point in time on the motion, Your Worship. I did mention the solar conversion. I believe one of our entry signs currently has power. I believe our other one does not. And so my intention with this is not to spend an exorbitant amount of dollars trying to run power for these. As we've seen at the fire hall, there was a very easy, very inexpensive solar conversion done. It was about, for the refurbishment and the solar conversion, it was in and around $1,000 for the lamppost at the fire hall. So it's a very inexpensive option, and if we don't have power or cannot have power at those locations, I would request that that be done through solar, which again also contributes to the green initiatives that we have in our community. Happy to answer any questions on that, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Laurie. Members of Council, any questions, comments to Councillor Laurie? And I'll also open up the floor for debate as well. Councillor Fletcher, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just a general comment towards that. I've seen this come forward a couple of times and been talked about on different occasions, and it does speak to the heritage of our community. And the lamp posts where they sit today are really just a pile of rubble that's being trashed. So I think it's a good way to recycle what is part of our community. It's a good way to bring back the past of what our community represented. And you know, I'll be listening forward to other councillors' comments tonight to see where this plays within part of our community.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question about the possibility of refurbishing them all with that solar conversion kit, so that, you know, again, in line with our green initiatives, what the added cost would be to do all 12 with solar as opposed to just the 2.
Bishop, I can add a comment on that.
Go ahead.
Obviously, I wouldn't have the exact answer to the solar conversion for all of them, but the one thing that I would consider is the solar conversion done on the one at the fire department is for what I would call a decorative purpose versus a functional light. So given the installation of the lights at Heritage Park, at Rotary Park, are likely to be a combination of a heritage representation, but also a functional light, that likely would add an increase in cost to that solar conversion because it would require a light with a much higher lumen. Whereas the lights for the entry signs are intended to be more of a homage to our heritage and more of a decorative than they are a functional. Therefore, the solar conversion would be similar to that at the fire hall, which is relatively inexpensive.
Councillor Anderson?
That's good, thank you.
Thank you. Any comments?
I believe the general manager had one.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to supplement and provide a little more information. So I believe the Rotary Park project was intended to be also used for lighting Christmas lights around the skating rink, et cetera. So, you know, so the solar option may not be appropriate at that location because of the other uses that we intend to make there.
Comments from anybody? Nope. Okay, Councilor Laurie, I will support the motion. I think the initiative is good in terms of the lighting and keeping the historical ambiance or connection in town Stony Plain as we continue to move forward. We will continue to grow and things will change. As what I've noticed in our community is as long as we stay rooted and connected to our past and where we came from, we will always build a better future. I think this initiative of putting those two street lights at the entrance signs on 16A will do exactly that. So I will support the motion. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Okay, and that is carried. Administration that, as the motion stated, that is coming out of a public art reserve instead of the Building Communities Fund, so there should be zero impact on the tax base. Okay, members of council, any other comments, motions to alter and make the budget ours? Okay, see none. Deputy Mayor, you have the chair.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we, in the 2022 budget, we allocate $55,000 to be funded from the tax stabilization reserve to do a highway development strategy on 628.
We'll just wait for it to come up. If you'd like to start while they get it up and speak to it.
Sure. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Some members of the council, we've seen initiatives that administration has proposed to do a highway development strategy on 16A, which is one of the major thoroughfares east-west through the town of Stony Plain. We can see a lot of it's already developed, and there's some empty lots and some parcels that are vacant and ready for development. I believe that's a good idea. But however, through our regional master plan with the city of Spruce Grove and Parkland County, Highway 628 is identified as a major arterial road in the future and will be also in the next major commercial sector for the town of Stony Plain. To get ahead of the curve, and we talk about having shovel-ready projects and understanding where we're going as a community, I think it might be very prudent as we're doing one study to see how highway development strategy can be improved and suggested on 628 so we don't have duplication. And as we continue to go and grow the next 5 to 10 years, we'll know what businesses, retail, industrial services that we'll need on both major arterials east-west through our community.
Open for questions and debate. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And this question is actually for administration regarding our administrative capacity to undertake this for the 2022 calendar year in which it's proposed. Would we have the capacity to add a second highway development strategy focused around Highway 628 within the 2022 calendar year in addition to the current one for 16A?
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Laurie and all of council. I believe the intent or the possibility would be to expand the scope and do the two strategies in conjunction so that there's some possibility to align them at the same time. So that's just the initial thought. I have to consider the capacity and how they can be addressed within that time frame if that's the wish of council.
Councillor Pletchko. Or sorry, I'm assuming you're done. Councillor Pletchko.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. My question was going to be directed towards strategic planning to see if that could be combined as a thing. Spoke to already, so thank you for the answer.
Sorry, did I see a question over here? Councillor Pletchko, or Councillor, sorry.
You're good. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm just curious. I would say, just as a point of reference on this motion, the town was determined, even I would say dogged, in a 20-year span about the province doing work on their provincial highway before the town of Stony Plain would consider taking over that highway. We like the idea of taking it over because then we have say over it. The same thought process might apply to Highway 628. Can you bring those of us who are new on council up to date so we can understand if there was any attempt made to get the province to do some upgrading, particularly on the west end of Highway 628 as it goes through Stony Plain, in order for us to consider taking it over?
Administration.
Deputy Mayor. So through you to Councillor Hansard and to the rest of council, I can try to provide a bit of a general overview of the last few years as it relates to highway ownership and transfers and so on and so forth. As council is likely aware, Highway 779, Highway 628, portions thereof, and 16A are provincial highways through the town of Stony Plain. The town of Stony Plain has had a rather long-standing position that at such time as certain upgrades occurred, that we would entertain or enter into discussions about becoming the road owner and or road authority for 779, for 628, and some discussion as well about 16A. So that's been I would say a relatively long-standing position of the town of Stony Plain, that until such time as those upgrades occurred, we would not enter into those sorts of dialogues. I'm sure we can all celebrate that 779 has ultimately reached completion for the vast majority of it in this past construction year. And so good to our word, the town would continue that. I believe it shows up in our strategic plan as a commitment, if I recall. Last few years, there were some upgrades done to 628. Not an extensive rebuild or major realignments, so to speak, but there were some upgrades done to, I'm sure you guys are aware, generally 779 East, and even that went further all the way to, I guess, into Parkland County, now Spruce Grove. I can't remember if it goes all the way to Sentry. No, it doesn't go to Sentry, but to, I'm missing the name of the road, but it goes that work extended beyond the Stony Plains borders. Not a lot of work was took place on the west portion or west of 779. I believe the general manager even spoke a bit last night to our partial ownership of a chunk there and so on and so forth. So, with that work occurring, it is the continued, I guess, policy of the town of Stony Plain to enter into those conversations. And to date, we have had some initial dialogues about that, but it hasn't matured or gone too far along. So So I think I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to ask the general manager of P&I maybe to, I know that there are some things in the corporate plan that speak to that, I believe, to any sort of takeovers or transfers. And if you can maybe just say a few words about that, some of the operating in that side of the world there. Oh.
We'll do administration first. And then
I'd like to interject. May I ask, just based on the motion that is on the floor, how does this relate to that motion? There's no talk about taking ownership or anything else. This is about doing a highway development strategy.
Don't mind responding if you're asking me what my question
Yeah,
is about.
Deputy Mayor?
It was about Highway 628, Ms. Deputy Mayor, through you to Mayor Choi. Obviously, if the motion is about creating a fund to begin working toward the end of upgrading or whatever on Highway 628, I thought it applied.
fair enough. Thank you, Councillor. Answered. Any further debate? Do we want to go to maybe the manager for his response?
Sure, and Deputy Mayor, I'm going to ask members of council to turn to page 9 of our corporate plan.
Sorry, page 9?
Page 9. As the question was asked about, both through Councillor Laurie and Councillor Plechko, about maybe combining maybe a highway development strategy of Highway 16A, which is proposed in the budget, and Highway 628. Again, it is outlined in Table 3 of Highway Development Strategy. Highway 16A running through the town of Stony Plain is not owned by the town of Stony Plain, yet it is in the corporate plan to do a highway development strategy because we can control the businesses and the development that happens around there. Highway 628 is not owned by the town of Stony Plain, it's owned by Alberta Transportation, yet we have the opportunity to control the highway development on that road. And this motion is not about ownership of the road at all. It's about developing a strategy to attract businesses to that area. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'll just ask you to keep the debate on topic.
All right, well, with that in mind, we won't go to the general manager. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I do have 2 other questions. I'll ask one, and then I'll let you move on, and I'll ask you to return if there aren't any others. It's in regards to the funding source. The funding source listed on this is tax base and tax levy stabilization reserve. Being that this is a one-time cost, I'm looking for some clarification from administration on why we have any funding from the tax base. Traditionally, tax-based funding are for initiatives such as additional FTEs and reoccurring expenses. So can we get a little bit of an explanation as to what portion of this is considered from the tax base and why?
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Laurie. The department had identified some of their professional services fees could be, I think it's 10,000, could be allocated to this project because it was a priority, and that's why it states the tax base. So it's not a new addition, it's just that they've allocated their existing professional services fees to this project in the current year.
So if I'm understanding the motion, would we have an additional $10,000 from the professional services fees? Would that 10,000 cover off both? Or are we looking this 55 would come 100% from the tax levy stabilization reserve?
Yes, that's how I would read the motion currently, that 55,000 would come from the stabilization reserve, and that reserve does have that amount to fund.
Thank you. Any further questions or debates? No, Mayor Choi. Oh, you do have another one? Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, so for my second one, and actually this question might necessarily be for Mayor Choi then. This highway development strategy, as we see it in our corporate plan on Table 3, contemplates Highway 16A. We're now being asked to contemplate Highway 628 as it is identified as a key corridor in many plans, including the IRTMP And so I'm going to ask Mayor Choi, the consideration of Highway 779, if we're going to be doing a highway development strategy and we are going to include 2 of the major highways through our municipality, I'm wondering if maybe we should look at all 3 of the highways through our municipality, particularly with some of the zoning changes that have occurred and now with all of the upgrades being completed on Highway 779. And I guess part 2 of that would be through to administration on if they could give an approximate cost on what they feel a strategy that would encompass all 3 highways would be.
Deputy Mayor, yes, I would like to have that answered through administration if we did 779 as well. Maybe I'll ask the answer to Councilor Laurie. I do not add in 779 at this point in time. As we drive through our community, Highway 779 is mostly fully developed already, so the amount of reconstruction and redevelopment that would have to be more dramatic, whereas 628 on the south side mostly is still undeveloped, and there's a lot of subdivisions already to be developed, and it was identified in the regional plan as the next east-west connector through this region.
Deputy Mayor, through to yourself and all of council, just as what I would offer as a recommendation is that if council would like to identify kind of the key scope of the project in terms of highway locations, the area that you want to address, frame the budget, the amount within that. We can identify the sources. And then perhaps we can get through the corporate plan process with that. We can work through kind of the scoping of the details of what council's looking for and bring back, some clarity once the corporate plan is approved. We can certainly work through defining these areas. I think if we want to get some priority from council tonight in terms of where the areas are that council would like us to address and look to a strategy, we can work through the process of developing the scope of services. If we haven't quite hit the mark on the funding, we can work through that after the fact, I believe. And I'm looking to the town manager just to kind of proposing this as an opportunity to move forward in terms of trying to identify what council is looking for in terms of the scope of the strategy, the highways that you want to include. And we can provide some clarity following that. I can't, create estimates of budgets at this point in time, but I think we can kind of work with the dollar amount that's identified here, as long as council gives us some general broad direction about the areas of development or the highways that you want us to include. Does that seem like a plausible?
Deputy Mayor, if I can maybe provide a few more comments as well to that. So I would, again, concur with the general manager's thought process there. And maybe if I can frame it this way. So, the motion on the table, I think, speaks to an expansion of the notion of looking at the highway development within the town of Stony Plain. Certainly, the dollar amount involved there would obviously provide for an expanded scope, as the motion's worded, to 628. But I would concur with the general manager in that should council see fit to provide that direction, there are other methods that we can use to, drill down into the thinking, so to speak. And I would say specifically the Growth and Commerce Committee would likely have been involved in the original project on some of the scoping and the interaction back and forth and where that was going to be and all that sort of stuff, and updated and whatnot. So I would say that's probably a place that some of that dialogue can be housed with the Growth and Commerce Committee itself directly. I'll stop there, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
So sorry, I'm just not sure what we're doing here, so I'll just ask a question. Is administration asking us to define a dollar amount to this initiative if we want to expand it, or?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, if I can just provide administration's perspective on that. As the motion is worded, our, I guess, interpretation would be that, further funding would be provided and 628 would be notified specifically. So if council was to vote that through, that's what we would take away from that. Further to that, I was, I guess, trying to indicate that I don't know that we need to get into the scope and definition and, I mean, the detail of what that may be exactly. But we would have a place to do that, and that place would probably be the Growth and Commerce Committee.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
So thank you for those comments, Administration and Deputy Mayor. And I do appreciate Councillor Laurie's comments about maybe adding 779. At this point in time, I would like, if Councillor would like to add 779, you can do that as a separate motion, or you can make this a unfriendly addition to that. I think we have a lot of work on our plates with administration and Highway 16A Highway Development Strategy. As a council, we already know that Highway 779 is already considered in the commercial transition zoning, whereas as redevelopment happens over the next 20 years, I think that would be a better time to review the highway development strategy for 779. As we know, all the businesses and residential houses that are along 779 will not be coming down for at least another 25 to 30 years before they start becoming to a condition where we would have to actually redevelop that area.
Councilor Laurie, you want to respond at all?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you to Mayor Choi for the comments. There are several sections of 779 that still have development opportunity on them, very small sections to the north of Highway 16A, but then we do have the section across from Willow Park where the former concrete plant sat that has now been moved, that obviously will be open for future development. We also do have to the south of the West Terrace subdivision that will be considered for future development as well. I won't go as far at this point in time into adding it into the motion due to the fact that, as Mayor Choi stated, you know, there is a majority of the development along 779 is done. There are already plans in place that are contemplating some of the redevelopment along 779. I'm a little concerned about watering down the highway development strategy and taking away from the development of 16A, as I feel that that is incredibly important for the further growth of our community, growth in our non-residential taxation revenue. But I do think that 628 is identified as a very important opportunity in the future, and it's better to prepare early than be on our heels and have development start happening or have improvements start happening and not have a plan in place as to how we want that to go. So I won't add anything to the motion. I'll support the motion as it stands right now with those comments.
Thank you, Councilor Laurie. Anything else? Anybody else? Mayor Choi, would you like to close?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, I ask members of council to support this. This is coming out of the tax stabilization reserve. So surpluses in the previous years have been gone into this to build this reserve, so it will not have an impact on the tax base. The reserve is used for one-off items like a strategy so that we can prepare ourselves as we continue to grow as our community expands out to the south side of Stony Plain.
All right, thank you. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried.
Okay.
Here's yours.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good work on that, stick handling. Members of council, any other motions, comments, and debate to make the corporate plan ours? Okay. Seeing none, Deputy Mayor, you have the chair.
Perfect. Thank you. Chair's yours.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, make a motion that that we add the word welcome in Stony language on the east, west, north, and south major arterial roads coming into our community. Currently, we have a sign that over the last few years, our sign policy has replaced and refurbished those entrance signs. Talking to many of our Indigenous neighbors around the community and the ones that live in our community, Stony Plain was named after the Stony Indians that settled here from the States. And as part of the Truth and Reconciliation, as the Town of Stony Plain, we fly the Métis flag. At our organization meeting, we acknowledge we make a land acknowledgement. Those words are vacant and void if we do not have action to them. Having the words welcome in the traditional Stony language was one step towards that acknowledgement and the reconciliation of the Indigenous brothers and sisters that are here before us that have settled the land prior to members of Stony Plain actually getting settled in this area. Funding source, I'm not too sure where that comes from, but I would, because this is a one-off, it's not part of the science strategy. It would also, I'd like to have that come out of the tax stabilization reserve as well. And in terms of a number, maybe administration can recommend a number to be put in there.
All right, opening floor to discussion, question, debate. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you to Mayor Choi for this motion. I think this, again, it's a small step, but a step forward nonetheless in our continued progress towards truth and reconciliation. My one concern is on the traditional Stony language. What I would like to see us do prior to approving the language that is used to put it on the sign would be actually to consult with our Treaty 6 partners to have them explain to us which language it should be used to put on the sign and whether that should be one specific language or whether there maybe are 2 or 3 languages that are included in the peoples that originally held this land. I'm a little bit concerned about ourselves as town council or our administration directing which language it should be in. I think we should take that lead directly from our Indigenous partners, and I'd like to make sure we're confirming that first.
Can we get maybe admin's position on that?
Sorry, I don't believe this was a proposed amendment. It was just a comment. So I'd look to Mayor Choi if he wishes to change his motion.
Yes. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Lawyer, for his comments. And definitely, we can add the word welcome in just in traditional Indigenous language. And then that way, then that leaves it open for administration to consult. And then that language would be based on the conversations that they've had with Treaty 6.
Good. Any, yes, Councillor Hansard?
Just a question, please, to understand. Mayor Choi certainly, sorry, through you, Deputy Mayor, to Mayor Choi. I certainly hear the intent behind this motion. I'm confused what that really has to do with governance. It seems like we're directing something that is not governance.
So Councillor, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Hansard, this is setting a lead and example of something that's in our corporate plan in terms of the truth and reconciliation and our commitment to further understand and build a relationship with their Indigenous neighbors. This is one opportunity to step forward. Many times we go to events and we hear the words and the land acknowledgements, but without action, they're meaningless.
Thank you, Mayor Choi. Any further debate? I think, oh, Councillor Justin Anderson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to build off of what Councillor Laurie said in terms of the consultation piece, and I appreciate, Mr. Mayor, that you've amended your motion accordingly, in that as much as we are on Stony land, we're also surrounded by a number of Cree communities. And, you know, as we've kind of talked about in the past, I know through our journey to coming to council through the campaign period. But, you know, for us to make decisions on behalf of a people group who are not represented here today, I feel like would be a misstep on our part. And so I would just like to pass my agreement with Councillor Laurie, and again, appreciate the amendment that you've offered.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I just wanted to provide some further commentary in regards to Councillor Hansard's comments. In the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, there are several calls to action that refer to municipalities, and a big portion of that is in regards to municipalities' governance. And so one of those calls to action, number 45, is to renew or establish treaty relationships based on principles of mutual recognition, mutual respect, and shared responsibility for maintaining those relationships into the future. To me, this is a very respectful way for us to solidify our relationship with our Indigenous partners, and that is 100% governance in my eyes, and I appreciate this motion coming forward so that we can continue down that path and recognizing those calls to action.
Councillor Laurie. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just as I kind of think through this a little bit further, I know, Mr. Mayor, you had mentioned you had conversations with some individuals around the community. My wonder is, you know, would this be a motion that would be supported by our Indigenous community in and around the Stony Plain area? And so I guess when I look at the wording of the motion, it looks like this is something we're going to do, and it's going to be in a language that is based on our consultation. But I wonder if we need to take a step back and engage in the consultation with our Indigenous communities prior to making a motion to add that to our town signage.
Councillor Anderson, I do appreciate the concern there, but I think a welcome sign can only be interpreted welcomingly. So I don't think we need to consult further. I think the consultation, getting the right wording and the right language will be probably sufficient. Councillor Lyons.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was just curious, I understand where we're asking the funding to come through, but what are we looking at cost perspective to redo all the signs?
Sorry, I missed that.
I was just saying, I understand where we're taking the funding from, but I was curious as to what the cost association would be to changing all the new signs.
That would probably be a good question for administration.
Deputy Mayor, through you to all of council, I would recommend that we work within the existing budget of the sign strategy as it is now, look at the scope of what's there. I believe we have identified the replacement of community bulletin boards as our next phase of work that needs to be done with our signage strategy. We can take this scope of work within that, and if the costing and things are bigger than we have budget for, we can look at how we can reprioritize, or we can bring back solutions around funding to council at a future time.
Thank you, administration. Is that a good answer? Okay. Any more debate? I'm afraid to even ask. Mayor Choi, would you like to close?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Plechko, I missed you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Going back to what administration just spoke to, through you to them, does that wording on this particular motion need, I see it's being highlighted already. I'm suspecting that needs to be reworded so that it reflects the current budget, not an addition to the tax levy stabilization fund.
To Councillor Plechko, I would just defer to our General Manager of Corporate Services and Manager of Finance to clarify the funding source for the existing signage strategy, and we could look at just whether that lines up. I would appreciate their clarification.
Deputy Mayor, I would just suggest that we, if that is what council wants to do, remove the tax levy stabilization fund and just add it to the signage replacement within the current year, which has a budget of $50,000 already funded within the current plan for 2022.
So Deputy Mayor, I think, appreciate the thoughts from Councilor Pletchko. I'd rather just change that to be funded through the tax stabilization if required. I think mentioned by the general manager, we'll try to run it through the current science strategy. If dollars are in excess of that or they need to reprioritize, they would come back to council. But if we just put as if required, and then administration has the direction to go ahead and do it, if that's suitable for members of council.
Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
My apologies, Deputy Mayor. I just want to clarify, I'm 100% in support of, proposing having something put on our signs that recognizes the traditional lands where we are, but I also know that English doesn't always translate literally to other languages. And so my support would be behind engaging with our Indigenous communities. But as I suggested earlier, as this is worded specifically in terms of the word welcome, I think I would not be able to support this motion as it's worded.
Did they already ask for your closing?
Not yet, Deputy Mayor. I'm just going to ask Councillor Anderson the issue with the word welcome. I understand it would be translated to whatever language that is appropriate. So it could be some form of welcome. Because currently the town of Stony Plain has welcome to Stony Plain. So I'm just asking to say welcome and then just having an additional welcome at the bottom.
Through the Deputy Mayor, thank you, Mayor Troy. Welcome is an English term, and I know in many communities they have different words that maybe have a similar meaning, but aren't necessarily that literal translation. And so I guess my suggestion that, again, would be in support of this would be to add a word of greeting in the traditional languages as opposed to specifically choosing the word that we're going to put there without consultation.
I'm not sure if that would require another motion to change that.
No, Deputy Mayor, I'm not accepting that as I think that's just a comment, and I'm not accepting that unless Councilor Anderson does make that change, unfriendly amendment, but it's not a friendly.
Well, Councilor Anderson, would you like to make that? No?
No.
Okay. Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. While I can appreciate where Councillor Anderson is coming from, I think given what's being proposed, we're getting a little bit into the semantics of it. We do already have greetings in other languages, including Indigenous languages in our public library. Those words are already put up there. I think if there is not a literal direct translation, the consultation with our Treaty 6 partners will flush that out, and we will find appropriate wording. Again, I think it does not change the premise or the intent of the motion in any way, shape, or form. I don't foresee if the exact translation of welcome isn't suitable or isn't felt suitable by our Treaty 6 partners. I don't see that would have to come back to council for a redo of the motion or anything like that. So I think the intent is there, which includes your comments, which includes that consultation, which includes ensuring that we're using the right terminology. I would support this motion as written because, again, it doesn't change the intent of the motion, and given the fact that consultation with Treaty 6 partners is in the motion, that will flush out any of those challenges.
Thank you, Councilor Laurie. Mayor Troy, would you like to close?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor and members of council. I ask you to support the motion. This is a step towards reconciliation and just making sure that we're trying to build those bridges with our Indigenous neighbors around us. In terms of the word welcome, the word welcome was already displayed on the Stony Plain Co-op mural. It does have the word welcome in Cree. It may not be translated exactly as welcome, but it is a welcoming term as hello. As Councilor Laurie has mentioned, our new Stony Plain Public Library has the word hello in lots of different languages of settlers that have settled in the town of Stony Plain. Do they exactly translate to hello? I would probably guess not, Councillor Anderson. So are we going to get into the area where we make sure that it is the exact word for word? We understand that words do translate slightly differently into different languages, and I think the intent is to have a sign that says welcome. It could be something that is appropriate, as the motion says, to consult with Treaty 6 neighbors, and then a wording will come forward from that best represents the word welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Choi. With that, I will call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Chair's yours again, or do you have another one?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I do have a couple others, but maybe members of council has other thoughts. Okay, see none. Deputy Mayor, you have the chair.
I don't think I left it.
You're still sitting there, are you not? Members of council have asked you to turn to page 64, please. As looking at the fiscal plan and municipal growth capital plan for the town of Stony Plain, there's an item there that is listed as CIVIC003G, which is the Public Works Building. At this current time and through the corporate plan is scheduled to be designed for 2027. I know this motion does not have a direct impact for this corporate plan and the 2 years preceding this, but I think in terms of what we've seen through a tour of the public works and the continued growth in the community, and even at a rate of 1.3% a year, that should get us to over about 23,000 people by the end of this term. In terms of servicing our residents, I think there has been some thought given to that, as well as we talk about having shovel-ready projects that may take into account and utilize grants that may come available for public service buildings and work. So I'd like to move that to 2026 and to have detailed design to start in 2025. So I'm asking council to move that a year ahead. So as spoken by the general manager last night, we usually do the detailed designs and consultation the year before, and then the build the year after.
Thank you. While they get that up, we can open the floor to some debate.
Deputy Mayor, if I may interject quickly, if I can just ask our General Manager of Planning Infrastructure to provide comment on any design processes that are underway at this point, and where we project those coming in at time-wise for the Public Works facility.
Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, through to all the council. So the detailed design for the Public Works building is underway this year and will be completed by the end of December. We expect to have more information for council early in the new year on the results of that work, and it will be basically shovel-ready at that time.
Okay, with that, we can just remove the second part of the motion. This is to have the reprioritize the public works building construction for 2026.
All right. How about some debate? Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll start my comments by saying, I am disappointed to see how far out this is in the plan. After touring and seeing the Public Works facility, seeing some of the challenges they face in regards to lockers being in the same area as diesel exhaust fumes, lack of washroom facilities, basic necessities. these are employees of the town, and we need to take care of employees of the town because they take care of the town, and they are our frontline image to our residents. A question that I have to administration, being that this was originally placed in 2027, and even though we are looking to move it up in this to 2026, which at this point doesn't really change much, what type of things are we going to be doing in the interim to improve working conditions and additional needed capacity in the existing facility in the next 6 years, 5 to 6 years before this facility is constructed?
Administration?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Laurie, appreciate that question and appreciate a, excuse me, a dialogue on this particular topic. I think to begin, yeah, you mean our public works facility as it is now is certainly not ideal, and frankly, I would say it's less than ideal in many ways. The I guess, decision or the recommendation to push the timing out is as much an overall fiscal capacity decision as opposed to a direct desire or need decision. And it would be the intent for administration, I mean, overall to, as we understand our, fiscal world as it unfolds over the next few years for sure, we would, we still consider this a priority, and how would we go about getting it done sooner would be a question we would continue to ask ourselves, as I think the GM just mentioned in dialogue yesterday about being shovel ready and how does that look, and does that speed up for grants and so on and so forth, and generally yes it does. So that's one of the reasons I think we recommended before and council saw fit to move to the design stages this year and going into the fall or winter of this year. So I say all that to I guess advise council or inform council that this does remain a priority, but we just need to understand the different fiscal impacts that are coming at us one way or the other, and if we felt that there was a earlier timing, or if the funding was more available, or if other grants came through for other projects and so on and so forth, we would be in here advancing it on our own for sure. So I'll just put that there. Your Worship, or sorry, Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Laurie, specific questions as to what's planned or what's available in the interim. And I'd ask the general manager, excuse me, if they've had some of that dialogue. I'm not sure that that they have, and if they have, that's great. What I would say though is that the timing of this thing, although we're working on that detail design, the timing with the corporate plan, that decision to shift it was made not 7 months ago. It was made a couple months ago when we started to see the numbers coming in and understanding the realization that just on straight fiscal side of the world, it may not be a reality as soon as we thought it could be. So I guess my summary on that is that this is a rather recent decision on our part. So I'm not sure how far along we've got on interim basis. And if the general manager can or wants to add anything further to that, please do so.
Deputy Mayor, through to all the council, just to supplement the town manager, we continue to adjust and do the best we can with the facilities we have. We've made some adjustments, which are somewhat easier in summer when the weather is not adversely affecting storage of equipment, which we like to have indoors. But in the summer we do have more summer seasonal staff around, so we've come up with some modifications to the interim, which are working reasonably well. In long term, though, as the town grows, it's definitely a challenge, both from the personnel perspective and also for the storage of equipment. In particular, the equipment we don't like to freeze and get too cold in the winter. So I would say we're doing what we can to mitigate. However, we haven't done a lot of planning on if it was going to be delayed significantly, what that might be or what other options we might have. As the town manager mentioned, these decisions are somewhat fluid at this time.
Thank you, administration. Follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and thank you very much to administration for those answers. Again, I think this is going to come down to a philosophical discussion as we approach our strategic planning in January. What I would like to request of administration is that we be sure council receives a tour of all town facilities prior to our strategic planning in January, so that particularly the new councillors can have a good understanding of our current assets, current condition, and current needs. You know, I completely agree that it's a very hard choice, and our fiscal situation moving forward is going to be one that we have to manage very carefully. I think it does go to, again, discussions around wants and needs. You know, you could take this project and put it up against our recreation center project, and you could have a very hearty and hefty debate as to which one of these facilities is needed more. One is much more community facing, one is much more internal. And so that brings forward again the discussion on, you know, which is better for our community. So I appreciate this motion, Mr. Mayor. I would love to see this even closer in the fiscal plan, but understanding our challenges, I do look forward to the discussions at strategic planning with council to determine what this may look like in the future and whether this may be something that we put a little bit more pressure on to be even further accelerated.
Councillor Hansard.
I have a question, please, Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you to Mayor Choi or perhaps the town manager or the general manager of planning. How long does it take for us to be able to bring this motion back if we find after our strategic planning sessions this year? I believe January, March are the two, or is it January, June? But if we go through those strategic planning sessions this year, and enough of us concur with Councillor Laurie's idea that this should be moved up, can things change, or would we wait for an entire year to next year's budget process?
Or administration.
Your Worship, sorry, Mr. Deputy Mayor, you know, through to the rest of council on that one. I think the quick answer, and I'll just keep it quick, is that, you know, I mean, decision direction given in the strategic planning retreat in January will typically hit the corporate plan the following year. So, you know, that would be the quick, straight answer on that. As we mentioned earlier, you know, I mean, the previous council direction was to move with the detailed design, and you know, that as much as anything, if you're not considering the funding side of it, you know, I mean, that's a lengthy process, and it was well reviewed and so on and so forth, and that would, you know, I mean, that took longer, so to speak, than if council was to say, you know, directly, we want this, we want it soon. You know, I mean, that would probably move pretty quick, but it would be the following corporate plan when the formal approval would be coming forward. That's traditionally the way it would go.
Thank you. Councillor Pletchko first.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor, through to administration. If I remember correctly, a while ago, we talked about possibilities of phasing, and yet I see this as a major project pushed out to 2027. Through the detailed design, is there a possibility that we would see that this is something that could be phased in over a shorter period of time, that we would be able to fit into our budget that would be more respective of the public works people and being able to house them in a better building or facility going forward? Is that something that we may be able to see that would maybe fit sooner into the next year's corporate plan?
Administration.
Deputy Mayor, through you to Councillor Pletchko. So the needs assessment that was presented to council was somewhat phased. There was the first phase had to do with you know, administration building and some storage, and then the second phase had to do with revamping the current annex, which is used for equipment. Those two items are the reasons for the 2 years that you see in the current 10-year plan in 2027 and 2028. Any additional phasing has not been contemplated at this time because we were proceeding based on the direction that council gave us previously.
Another one? Any further debate? Shall I summarize, or would you like to close?
You can summarize after I close. Members of council, I do ask you to support the motion. As mentioned, there are facilities within the town of Stony Plain that we need to replace and kind of expand. The old Public Works building has been in existence for a very long time through the acquisition of the Annex building, which is the old Timber Market West building that has been kind of converted into storage and also office buildings. Currently, that is doing its job right now. But in terms of future growth and services that will be provided for our community, I think it is prudent for us to kind of move this up a year from the corporate capital plan, and then the administration will have to deal with the planning and the fiscal constraints of all that happens if this is done. Just to kind of provide some clarity and understanding of why this is put forward is, I think we need to take care of our staff that takes care of our community as well, right? This, as we just heard from the general manager, that the design and the needs will be completed at the end of this year. So it allows us the opportunity to start plotting this in and how we're going to borrow and fund the construction of a new public works building. That being said, to address Councillor Hansford's question of can we bring this back sooner? 100%. Council talks about strategy, understanding priorities. We can do that. But also the thing that's not known to us is sources of funding. For example, in our corporate, in our council strategic plan, there is an item in there that says that we're going to work on a above grade rail crossing on Range Road 12, so an overpass. Right? It is quite a few years down in terms of commitment, process, and everything. However, if CN or Building Safe Communities from the federal government comes in and says, you don't want to give you $25 million to do that, well, then that jumps right to the front of the line because we have that dollars to do. And then staff and council will reprioritize and they'll have to redo the fiscal plan to match that. So at any point in time, if there's a grant that does come forward to one of our priorities, we can make those adjustments, Councilor Hanson. So I do ask members of council to support it. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Choi. And with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Oh, sorry. All right. With that, that's carried. Your chair is back to you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Well done. I have two more motions that I'd like to address unless members of council has another motion. Okay, see none, Deputy Mayor, you have the chair.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I make a motion that that the four positions that are currently in the corporate plan be readjusted as start date as the second quarter of 2022.
Would you like to speak to it?
Yes. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Members of council. Again, I bring this motion forward as there might be other motions that will be brought forward to increase the tax rate. We understand that that we need these positions to help provide the services that our residents rely on, definitely internally, and communications, etc. However, this budget is built in for a full year, starting January 1st, and I know we'll approve this budget in November 29th, which doesn't come into effect until January 1st. So my thought is that we will not be able to hire somebody to start January 1st. So if we defer the positioning or the hiring of the position to start the beginning of the second quarter, which is April 1st of 2022, which will save us 3 months of salary in each one of those positions from the 2022 corporate plan. That's overall savings of $83,750. The senior analyst was earmarked at $124,000, so that is a savings of $31,000. The service deck technician was budgeted for $86,000. That's a saving of $21,050. The RCM clerk, which our share was roughly 30,000, so that will defer $7,500 to next year. And the corporate communications position was scheduled at 95,000, which would then defer $23,750 to the 2023 corporate plan. So overall, it's a net savings of $83,750.
Okay, does that look about right for you?
Yes. I'm glad the administration adjusted accordingly so they can fine-tune the numbers for us before it comes back later on.
All right, opens for questions, debates. Go ahead, Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm looking at this with a bit of concern. The positions are in the corporate plan because they've been identified as needed and restricting on when the positions can be hired, I think is a disservice. I would agree the likelihood of having them in place for January 1st is potentially slim, but it is possible that it could happen. One I look at, for instance, as a senior financial analyst, I'd certainly love to have that person in the position and with their feet quite wet before spring adjustments come to us. That's a very beneficial position in that department. As well as we've heard about some projects coming down the pipe in regards to our IT infrastructure, and so again, getting that service desk technician in place. I worry if we delay the start date on these positions to at minimum April 1st, that may actually impact some of the projects and plans that we have and may delay them further, which may put strains on all kinds of different activities. As well, I don't see it on the screen, but I'm curious if we can actually see the tax impact of this change. You mentioned, it's minimal. And if my calculation's right, if I broke it down correctly, it would save our taxpayers a whopping 41 cents a month per $100,000 of assessment value. And I don't think that savings is really worth the potential cost to the town to force delay the hiring of those positions until April 1st. I think the value would be there to have those positions funded as April 1st or as January 1st. And should those positions not be hired until after that date, that contributes to surplus, which will help cover other expenditures. The other challenge I see with this, and thank you very much, I see that saves us 0.49%. That's also automatically 0.49% that we have to add into next year's corporate plan, because now we have to ensure that those positions are funded for a full calendar year. I know you mentioned you may have a forthcoming motion that potentially increases the tax rate. However, I don't think I can support this. I don't see the value there. I think we can argue and debate whatever motion you have upcoming without this in place, because it should stand on its own with merits and values that would not be impacted by this reduction. Again, this forcibly puts something into the next corporate plan that was not contemplated in the current corporate plan, and it potentially creates hardship on other projects that we could have moving forward within the municipality this year. So I would not support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Mayor Choi, would you like to respond, or?
I'll summarize at the end.
Sure. Is there any other debate? Sorry, Councillor Hatzard.
I have a comment. Yes, I would consider this debate. Through your deputy mayor, I've seen this strategy used in other years, and yes, it does seem like a relatively small amount when you bring it right down to each individual taxpayer. But those little amounts, one here, one there, can add up to keeping the tax increase for this year down a bit. And I'm thinking, you know, if we were having this debate in September and we still had 4 months till Christmas holidays, we're going to slide right through approximately 2 weeks of probably not putting that person in place, or they be here and we're off for some holiday time. So I'm not convinced that it would be that harsh. Perhaps I would like to see it be a different month, perhaps March. But I can support this unless the wisdom of my colleagues on council or administration convinces me otherwise in the next few minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, for the opportunity to respond to that. To Councillor Hansard's point, again, I don't believe that these positions will be hired by January 1st. However, there's 2 key points of clarity on that. Number 1 is the budget will come back to us for spring adjustment. At that point in time, the positions will either have been hired, or at that point they will not have been hired yet, and we will understand the financial impact of that. Number 2, if we do not include the full funding of the position in the 2022 corporate plan, it is an automatic addition to the 2023 corporate plan. All we are doing is kicking that can down the road. We cannot fund these staffing positions at 75% next year. They will have to be funded at 100%. So by taking the portion out of the corporate plan today, we're not actually achieving any savings. The savings we'll achieve will be from when those positions are hired. And we will realize those savings whether we do this motion here today or whether we just see it happen in spring adjustments and potentially further down the road when we actually deal with the year-end surplus for 2022. I see a huge risk in this by saying to administration, you may not hire these positions until at minimum April 1st. We have many projects contemplated in this corporate plan and many projects that are already approved and already moving forward that we don't see in this corporate plan that could be impacted by not having these staffing positions fully staffed as soon as possible. I don't see the value in kicking the can down the road and potentially putting at risk items of importance to the operations of the municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Any further debate? I do have a question of my own, and it's maybe just for clarification from administration. Do they, to Councillor Laurie's question, will off-putting the hires affect any other portion of the corporate plan?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, yeah, I can provide some general comment on that, maybe not super specific, but general comment. Yeah, you know, the staff, you know, the intent, the timing is that, you know, 2 things. It's, I mean, a January 1 or close there to start date. You know, they will typically, sometimes we'll get these things out even before Christmas so that the ads are out and so on and so forth. And the idea is to have those staff members in place as soon as possible. So, you know, I mean, work plans are being drafted, you know, I mean, so on and so forth to with that in mind and to, you know, the timing of projects thereof. So, you know, I mean, short answer or straight answer, yes. You know, I mean, those things can have impacts on projects and processes and so on and so forth. You know, on the other side of that, like anything else, you know, I mean, council direction as given will be implemented. So, you know, we do adjust, we can adjust, we make changes as necessary, given council's direction. So,
thank you. Councillor Loynes?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was just wanting clarification from the mayor as to what he hopes to achieve by putting the hiring on hold.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and to Councilor Loyens and to the rest of council. It is a budgeting thing. And we do that in terms of our own business and our own financial households, and also in the town of Stony Plain. I'm not saying that these positions are not warranted and valid for the staff and to provide the services that we do. I'm saying let's look at that, and even if we defer some of the taxes till next year, as we've heard that there is going to be an increase this year and an increase next year in terms of growth, then saving 0.49% this year doesn't mean a 0.49% increase next year. It may be a 0.4% increase next year because of our growth rate, right? So therefore, we have that opportunity to do that. And in terms of, I think Councilor already mentioned about the spring adjustment, because it's budgeted for a full year, even though we do not hire somebody, maybe for 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, whatever that case is, they don't come back during spring adjustment to reduce the amount that was asked. It's still there. So that comment about, well, we can reduce it in spring adjustment is not valid and does not sit here because they don't reduce that. It's fully funded for the whole year. In terms of organizations, yes, it might have an impact, it might not have an impact. The question is, and we can ask ourselves all that, how likely it is for us to have a corporate plan to be approved on November 29th, to have somebody hired by January 1st. As we heard from the town manager, they're just in the process of developing the scope of work and going out in terms of interview and to advertising. Maybe ask the question to the general manager or to the town manager. We had quite a few vacancies within town of Stony Plain. How long did it take us to hire the manager of legislative services?
Your worship, frankly and respectfully, I don't know that we need to debate the timing and length of hires and so on and so forth. Clearly we put forward, these are set for January 1st start dates. Does that happen? No, obviously it doesn't start right on January 1st. We set them up so that, the tax rate supports it from January 1 to December 31st. So, Your worship, if I may respectfully just decline to answer that specific question.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, thank you, and I appreciate that comment. Again, that is the whole point. We do not know when these positions will be filled and if we have any qualified candidates to fit them. So in terms of budgeting and moving forward into the community, maybe budgeting for 75% of the position this year and 25% the next year allows us a little more breathing room, especially there's another motion that does require additional dollars that'll be coming forward for me. So I'm trying to balance the fact of not having a too high of a tax increase year after year. Going through the election trail campaign just currently, I hear a lot of residents that they're okay with a steady increase. So having the ups and downs can be prevented, and that's prevented by budgeting our staff and when we hire them, and that is the reason why I bring that forward, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Choi. Councillor Kolechko, I believe you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through to Mayor Choi and administration. I think one of the things that always concerns me when we talk about the staff within our community is our staff does a job that moves our community forward. They are there for the people that we represent. And I think it's important when our staff, administration, CEO comes to us and says, we need more employees. It's always a tough thing to look at. When you walk on the campaign trail, you'll hear too many staff. You'll hear not enough staff. We don't get enough done, or we're getting too much done and too many people sitting around. So it's always a tough thing. The concern I have tonight with what's going on is we're talking about a small percentage, and I get it's only a small percentage, as Councillor Hanser pointed out. It's a 0.49% a reduction, and my suspicion in the back of my mind is there's a 1.5% increase coming somewhere along with what we're talking about tonight. So we're going to be back up to a 4 or 4.5% tax increase. So the concern I have tonight with cutting staff or telling our employees that they can't hire somebody is what happens between now and April if the ideal staff member comes along, like happened in corporate services, we're not able to make that hiring position. That person may take a job at another municipality that could affect, typically been in place for what we are asking, or our employees are asking for tonight. So I struggle a bit with what's going on right now with a small percentage. You know, I think one of the things is we always keep the heart of what our community is by trying to keep taxes low, and we know that our community is in a bad situation with a lot of the economic times that are going on. But sometimes, if you look to the past, where there was 0%, that's always made up. So by keeping the tax reasonable, as well as being able to deliver the proper services to our community, I think is something we as councillors are challenged with every day when we sit at this table. So I'm looking to hear a little bit more tonight, hopefully from some of the other members at the table here tonight, of why this should or shouldn't be supported. Because we're talking about moving our community forward, we're talking about a growth rate, and yet we're stumbling on a 0.49% of hiring employees that can help us to do what we need to do. So I think we need to, at this point in time, unless I can really hear something different from the members of council, I struggle with supporting this initiative tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pletchko. Good remarks. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Meyer. We've heard from Mayor Choi that one of the reasons in bringing this forward is that he has another potential motion which may include an increase. So therefore, I'm going to put a motion on the floor that we table this motion at this point in the meeting, and we hear the next motion so that we can debate and argue it on its merits, and then we bring this motion off of the table after that debate and that motion has been decided. If we move forward with the debate and a decision on this motion passes, and one of the intents is because there's a motion for an increase coming, and that motion fails, now we've removed these staff positions, and it did not have part of the desired effect as to why that motion was brought forward. So I'm suggesting at this time that we make a motion that I'm going to make a motion that we table this, so that we can hear the next motion and we can debate that motion and then bring this off of the table after that is concluded.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Maybe legislative could just, I believe it's automatic, right? Go ahead.
So a motion to table does take precedence, so we'd have to deal with that motion to table right away, and it's a non-debatable motion at this point.
Sorry.
It's not a debatable motion.
Okay.
So just call the
then
question.
Just call a question on tabling this motion. I call. No. We're tabling it. I'll call a question. All in favor of tabling the motion? And that carries.
Opposed.
Oh, sorry, and opposed?
Well, yeah, I'm gonna vote for it then, sorry. I was just a little confused over what we were voting on.
So point of clarity, Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
So just for clarity, then that motion carried 6-1 with Mayor Choi being the sole opposition?
I believe
It
so.
would be, sorry, my hand
Okay.
wasn't in the right place.
Just want to make sure we had it. Thank you.
All right, Mayor Choi, I believe you have another motion?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. And to members of council, this is a corporate planning, so in terms of bringing motions back to the table after it's been defeated, does not have to wait the customary 1-year period. So any motion that is changed and defeated now, earlier in the evening, can be brought back anytime tonight as well. So to have that tabled, even though it was not debatable, it was a moot point, because if we should have debated the previous motion on its merits itself, and the next one coming forward on its merits itself. And if that fails, that being brought back through another motion. So it doesn't have to wait the traditional 1-year time period. Members of council, then Deputy Mayor, if I may.
Yep, please.
Okay. Yes. Okay, I make a motion that we add 1.5% to the corporate plan. That will go to the transfers to the capital infrastructure replacement funding program.
If you'd like to speak to it.
Sure.
They get it up on the board.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. This was a new initiative started by administration and definitely from the direction of council to better look after our infrastructure within our municipality. As mentioned by from councils, that 0% tax increases and other times that had a negative effect on our public works, like roads, sewers, wastewater, water, and all that stuff. Staff have come to a point where adding over the next 5 corporate plans of 1% transfer to the capital infrastructure replacement to address some of those needs. Within our community, I believe that there is over $65 million in deficit, in infrastructure deficit, that we cannot fund for. Okay? That does not bode well for the growth of the community. It does not bode well for existing residents of having that much infrastructure deficit that's on our books. A 1.5% this year will allow us to get the program started. If council can change to page 52 of our corporate plan. Through the numerous presentations during our audits, it's mentioned that our tax rate is low. Our reserves are just as low because the council plan has not increased our taxes to prepare and build proper reserves to take care of our community. This motion will be that step in that direction. Looking at page 52, you can see through the fiscal plan for the 2021 tax levy comparison, Stony Plain is in the middle in terms of residential taxes. With the new tax rate model that was approved by council last term, that will shift it and it will move it down. Right? The only municipalities that have a lower residential property tax is Devon and Fort Saskatchewan. Both those communities have their own utility services. Fort Saskatchewan has the upgraders, which they can generate lots of non-residential tax base from. You look down in the second graph, which is the non-residential property tax comparison levy. Stony Plain is second from the bottom, the lowest, almost, besides Leduc County. So our rates have been historically low, but so have our reserves and the amount of work that we can do in our community to support and refurbish and replace the infrastructure that we do have. Right? A motion of adding 1.5% to the corporate plan that's allocated, not to general revenue, not to anything else, but to the capital investment replacement program. So our roads, sewers, our buildings, as outlined. Okay. And again, looking at page 52, over the last few years, we know Beaumont and City Spruce Grove are the fastest growing communities in the region. It's not because they have a lower tax rate than us. It's because they offer services to the residents. St. Albert has the highest residential tax levy. That hasn't stopped them from growing. That has allowed them to provide services and amenities and the needs of the residents. That is why they continue to grow. If you look at the non-residential taxes, same thing. Our advantage may have been lower taxes in the past, but that's not an advantage anymore. Residents are regional. They will go where the services are, they will live where the amenities are, and if we can't keep up, make sure our infrastructure is well preserved and safe for our residents, then it doesn't matter how low your taxes are. Residents and businesses will not come into the town of Stony Plain. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Choi. Open for questions of clarity. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to Mayor Choi, can you just give me a little bit of an indication of why 1.5% as opposed to 1% or?
Yes, thank you, because I think as built into the fiscal plan is 1%, but we're starting from a deficit. We're over a $60 million deficit in terms of infrastructure replacement costs in our community. That 0.5%, as we know through investing in long-term planning, will snowball into a larger amount. And that is why we chose 1.5 versus the 1%. And that 0.5 is probably equal to the 0.49 that I was having to remove.
Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Mayor Choi, as mentioned, this is already in existence in our current corporate plan to start in 2023. I'm just curious as to why the motion would not just be to move the current initiative from 2023 to 2022.
Yes, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. And again, that initiative starts in 2023, but it's only at 1%. So I like to accelerate that to 2022, but also add 0.5% extra.
Councillor Pletchko.
Can you put the actual numbers up on the screen, please? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So further to the question is, I'm just wondering if you can go one step further and show us what this tax increase actually means to the residents. So in part of our package, it's about a $17 tax increase. What the 5% will mean to our individual residents so that they can see, we can clearly see what a 1.5% increase means over the 3.52 that we were currently at.
Administration. Oh, that was like 1 minute ago.
While they're doing that, I'll just make a few more comments. I think one of the things that's really key here tonight that we're talking about is we heard earlier in discussion last night a bit about some rates that were a bit higher than normal, and we're looking for some examples towards that. And the reason for it was there was a need in our community for that service, and there was no starting base prior to. Today, we're doing the same thing. We're looking for a tax increase of 1.5% to fund something that we know our community desperately needs. You know, so it's a hard pill to swallow for all of us. Probably a little easier at the beginning of a council term than it is at an ending of a council term to defend some of the reasons that we do things. But one thing on this term as councillors we really need to look at is where this community sits. And it has not sat in a good position, and we're seeing that as we go along. So this is not a reflection of anything that's happened in the past. It's just a reality that today we sit in a situation where our community needs a lot of things that we can't give it back. And when the new councillors get a chance to go around and actually see what our community needs, you're going to be a bit flabbergasted. I know I was the first term. When I seen our public works building, I just about fell off my chair, and it still haunts me today to think about it. So some of the things that we need and we hear from our community, and I know when we're on the campaign trail, I know the first time I was out there that, you know, I heard a lot of things and I went, yeah, we can change that or we can do this. But when you get to this point on council, you get to see what is really real for our community. And the lack of services, the lack of being able to move our community forward has slowed the growth down, has slowed our developers down. So if we need to get some of these people back into our community, not always does it have to be at the cost of the taxpayer, but it does need to be a cost of the community, which eventually gets right back to our taxpayers. So we need to consider a lot of things today when we're sitting at the table, and some of that is the situation that we're in. I would encourage each one of you to have a bit of a conversation today at the table of what you've seen on the trail and what you're experiencing as a reality as to how we move our community forward. It's always nice to hear that, and especially when we're talking about increasing taxes from 3.52 to 5.0%. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hansard.
Well, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'd simply like to say that
Sometimes we see things and it's not on the campaign trail. I can remember dealing with several of the business owners on the east side of Main Street telling me that they had issues with water coming into the basements of their businesses. And come to find out, it wasn't their pipes, it wasn't their problem, it was a town problem. When we started digging up Main Street and the horrific condition of the infrastructure, the pipes in the ground started to be pulled out, it was shocking to think that that was supporting our downtown core, because the metal was full of holes, it was twisted, it was rotted, it was falling apart. And you look at that and you go, if that was in the downtown core, what is everywhere else in town? When I first came on council in 2001, I can remember a town manager talking with us about infrastructure debt. I didn't understand that term, but over the years, I came to understand that that's a really serious problem. Infrastructure debt is the stuff you don't see that really causes a problem for businesses and for residents. I don't like to see tax increases that begin to feel uncomfortable. But I'm a taxpayer, I'm a senior, and sometimes we have to understand that if we don't take serious steps to start rectifying that infrastructure debt, when it collapses, it's a whole lot more money. Because now you're talking about things having to be done with speed and people's homes having problems. I'm absolutely for taking care of the infrastructure in the ground and making sure that we are not falling behind on that. Unless the wisdom of my colleagues on council convinces me otherwise, I'm inclined to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Councillor Loynes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just for clarification, originally it had said the 1% tax per year. Are we eliminating that 1% for next year and keeping it the 1.5% for the proposed 5 years, or are we just 1.5% this year and 1% next year?
Mayor Choi.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Loynes. It is 1.5% this year, and then there's no motion to change anything on the previous council. So it is what it is, and at the next corporate plan, if council sees fit to increase that to whatever percentage or reduce it, that's at that point in time.
Any further debate? Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Could we see the motion on the screen, please? Thank you. I do completely agree with the merit of this and it being brought forward. And as we heard, we do have a significant infrastructure deficit that administration has already started a plan or put forward a plan that would start in 2023 to begin to address this. By year 5 of the plan that is proposed, administration is saying that we would be collecting $852,500 per year to go directly towards our capital infrastructure replacement funding. So that would essentially build up over the 3-year time. We see the cost in table 20 on page 27 only showing $341,000, but that's not actually true. Year 1's a collection of $170,500. Year 2 is $341 even. Year 3, $511,500, and so on and so on. And so those are incremental steps to put a very large amount of money into our infrastructure funding. If we add this 1.5% on right now, is adding a little over $200,000. I think it was about $220,000, somewhere around there, today, as well as next year, as well as the following 6. I'm not saying that that's not worthwhile, but what I don't see is I don't see why we wouldn't just take the current initiative that is in there right now and move it forward to 2022. And as that initiative starts to be put in place and as that initiative builds, we would then see in future corporate plans how that is going to begin to address our need. This is a great opportunity to kickstart it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not questioning the merit of this motion. It just, to me, it doesn't make sense why we would put forward something new or different or what have you, rather than taking an initiative that's already in the corporate plan and moving it forward. So I'd like to make an amending motion, if I may, Deputy Mayor.
Go ahead.
I would like to amend the motion that council move the current initiative from 2023 forward to 2022 at the original proposed rate of the initiative of 1%. And then I'll speak to that.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As mentioned, I don't question the merit at all of the original proposed motion. I think moving this initiative forward and getting this initiative underway now is prudent and very, very important. Obviously, we've heard we do have an infrastructure deficit, and we will continue to have an infrastructure deficit. What this doesn't contemplate is it doesn't contemplate our growth. And it doesn't contemplate that a 1% that is $170,500 today will not be the same in 5 years' time. In 5 years' time, a 1% growth could be $200,000+. This gives us a start. Administration was planning to start this in 2023. My understanding would be that's because they feel where that was suitable to start it. I think moving that initiative forward is sufficient enough. I don't think we need to bring it to 1.5%. I think this is a prudent move that allows us to get this underway. It puts it in a time where it's reasonable, and it allows us to continue to build on that, to get going on any potential interest income we may receive on that as we put that fund away as soon as possible. So that is, that's my amending motion on that, and I will turn that over to you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. We're debating the amending motion. Any questions? Councillor Pletchko?
Do we have the numbers ready yet? If we could see them, please.
First, that Councillor Pletchko had maybe requested earlier, so I think we can throw those up on the screen. They will speak to the 1.5, I believe.
Thank you through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Pletchko and all of Council. I will not throw them up on the screen because I have quite a messy spreadsheet here to calculate that really quickly for you here. However, I will spew off the numbers for you. So for every basically 1% per 100,000, it's $4.94 impact to the resident. So for a 1.5% tax increase per 100,000 would be $7.41. So if we equate that to the table on page 56, which is the average house of $350,000, that would increase that from $60.90 to $86.85. So approximately almost $26 annual impact.
Thank you.
So if we took it to the 1%, you're $18?
Correct. That would be approximately $17.30 if we had the 1%.
So again, a comment to that if I could, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, please.
So as you can see, the difference between numbers when you're talking 0.5% of a tax increase, leaving the 0.49% that we were looking to reduce, really does not make a lot of impact over a one-year period. It's a small, minimal impact, whether it's a 1% to 1.5%. What's important to remember tonight, whichever way you want to decide to vote, is what's important is we're making the initiative to get things rolling ahead of time, something that is currently needed within our system. I do appreciate that administration has chose to move it out one more year to 2023. However, I do feel it's very important, and listening tonight, I can support either one of those decisions to increase it by 1 or 1.5%. So it'd be interesting to listen to the rest of the comments as we debate the amended motion.
Thank you, Councillor Pletchko. So we're still debating the amending motion. Councillor Anderson? Okay. Anybody else? Going once, going, there you go. Councillor, or Mayor Choi.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I appreciate the comments and thoughts from members of council, and definitely the amending motion from Councillor Laurie. I will not support the motion because I believe that, as mentioned, the intent is right, and I think everyone around this table supports that. However, we are starting from a deficit. Like everything that we have done here is we are here because of the previous decisions of council past us. Right? We already know that we already have an over $60 million infrastructure deficit. We've seen that our taxes are very low, our reserves are very low. We've also been shown that our debt ceiling limit is coming close because of the infrastructure projects that we need to do. Starting this is definitely a no-brainer. I think there's support around the council table here. Is it going to be 1% or 1.5%? As asked and answered by Councilor Pletchko, the difference is minimal. But that few cents has a huge impact 25 years down the road in terms of correcting and addressing all the infrastructure deficit that we have in our community. So I do ask members of council not to support the amendment and go back to the original motion.
Thank you, Mayor Choi. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just maybe a point of clarification with the motion, the original motion of the 1.5% in 2022, that in effect will extend the initiative to 6 years.
Sorry, I'm just gonna, we're still just working on just the amending motion. We gotta get through that.
Okay.
We'll have an opportunity, I'm sure, to talk back about the other one after we get through this, if that's all right. Sorry, not to be a jerk about it. Any further debate on the amending motion? Okay, call the question.
I'll close if there is not.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Close.
Yeah, close.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Again, my amendment is not to debate the merit of the capital infrastructure replacement funding. I think it is a great initiative, and I do fully support that. My amendment is so that we follow administration's recommendations. Although we have heard we have an infrastructure deficit, our administration has come up with a plan as to how to address that infrastructure deficit. Administration also has not told us any potential risks or pitfalls if we do not start it earlier or if we do not do a larger amount. They have requested 1%, and they have requested that 1% building over 5 years. That 1% building over 5 years with the plan that they put in place would raise $2.557 million worth of infrastructure funding within 5 years. That's a pretty large amount. Adding this amount in today and running this program for another running this program for the original 5 years starting in 2023 as our current capital plan suggests would put another $1.5 million into that, making that essentially $4 million. Again, not debating the merit of it, but what I am looking at is that's a significant amount more money than administration did request. We heard the mention of 0.5% is a small amount, and agreed, it is. But those small amounts all collectively make up our corporate plan. Whether it's a 0.5% here, a 1% there, a 3%, a 0.2, whatever it is, all of that makes up our corporate plan. Administration's plans moving forward take into account all of those small percents. My concern is if we go to 1.5% today, which is above the recommendation of our administration, what now do we look at in the future that administration may hold off the table or may have to consider holding back on? I agree this program needs to happen. I agree we have a deficit. I agree we should start this program now rather than pushing it out a year. I cannot support the 1.5%, as to me, it is grabbed out as a number that the mayor believes would be sufficient. No denying it would help. It certainly would. But administration has a plan. I support moving forward the initiative that administration has put forward. But unless administration comes to us and asks for a larger amount, I don't support arbitrarily increasing that.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. I call the question on the amending motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. That's carried.
If you'll just give us a minute or so, we'll get the amended motion rewritten and up on the screen for you.
Well, we'll take this opportunity for a 10-minute break. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Sorry? Welcome back. If we could have the motion up on the screen, please. All right, we'll open it back up for further debate. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and not debate, just a comment. I just really want to thank Mayor Choi for bringing this discussion forward. It's a very, very worthy cause. As we talked about, the infrastructure deficit is certainly something that's of concern to our community. We heard it very loud and clear from our community in the election trail, and we don't want to get into another situation like we were with the likes of Main Street, where we have crumbling infrastructure and we are struggling to replace and maintain it and struggling to get the funding for it. So it's very important, very pivotal this comes forward. I will very strongly support this and highly encourage all of my fellow councillors to support it as well. What I do appreciate is now that this is being started now rather than 2023, it also gives us a good opportunity to analyze it within the next year or two to determine whether that 1% is a sufficient amount or whether we do need to increase that. So those are all the comments I have. Again, appreciate it. I will be supporting the motion, and I encourage the rest of council to as well.
Mayor Choi.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, members of council, for the conversation and the amendment from Councillor Laurie. Definitely, I support the motion. This is an initiative that we need to start right now, and regardless if it's 1% or 1.5%, it is a starting point for us to build a reserve for replacement of our capital infrastructure. Deputy Mayor, actually, since we already had a conversation about this for about probably 45 minutes ago, I'll just ask you to call the question.
And with that, I will call the question. All in favor? Carried. I believe that brings the end of my chairing duties.
Deputy Mayor, no, action, that does not. Actually, then the previous motion gets brought back to the table, so you're still the chair.
Oh, that's right. Excuse me. If I could get somebody to make the motion to untable Councillor Laurie. I think he's just going to make the motion.
Just to make it clean, I would make a motion to retrieve her from the table, please.
Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Since I moved to table the motion, I would move to bring that off the table and back into council discussion.
We're not going to debate that. We'll just call the question. All in favor? That's passed. All right. Now we're back to the motion. Mayor Choi.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And with that, and seeing the proceedings going on, I'd like to withdraw the motion, please.
Sure. That's done, right? Do we have to make a motion for that? No? He's withdrawing it. Perfect. You're the chair again. And I would like to thank you for the great learning opportunity that this was and the experience.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I appreciate it. And you did work well. It is always an experience trying to chair a meeting, especially we don't get an opportunity to do that quite often. So definitely looking forward to those opportunities to provide that leadership towards you and then the members of council. Members of council, we've made a few adjustments and motions that have altered the proposed corporate plan for administration to see our priorities come forward to fruition and maybe accelerating some of the ideas that were outlined. Commission provide the full impact of the proposed new tax increase, please.
Worship, I will just comment that I believe that's what you're requesting is what's on the screen.
Okay. Thank you. Members of council, any other questions, comments, motions? Okay. Seeing none, I do not have any more. So again, on behalf of our residents and the members of council, thank you very much, administrative staff, for bringing this corporate plan forward. As mentioned by many times by members of council reading through the package, this is definitely a reflection of the municipal development plan and also the council strategic plan. The guidance that council has provided is shown here, and it will go a long ways into leading our community to where it needs to go as we mature from a small town to a mid-sized community. And with that, no more. I'd like to adjourn the meeting to the members of council. The official adoption of the corporate plan will happen November 29th. right? But however, the tax rate is still proposed until we do spring adjustment in April of 2022. Okay. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.